Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're going to be diving into some deep waters today. We're talking all about how narcissists approach sex.
Okay.
We're drawing our insights from the Narcissistic Abuse Network for this one. And fair warning, this one might get a little intense. But stick with us, because understanding this can really be eye-opening in all sorts of relationships.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt like someone was more interested in the act itself than in connecting with you during sex? Well, today we explore why that might be.
Yeah, what's really fascinating about this source is how it flips the script on how we typically think about sex. I mean, for most people, it's about love and vulnerability and intimacy. But for narcissists, it becomes almost transactional.
Transactional, so like they're getting something very specific out of it.
Yeah.
Beyond just physical pleasure.
Exactly. The source uses terms like a weapon or a means to an end, even relieving tension, not creating bonds. It's about validation, control, sometimes even a twisted form of punishment.
That's chilling. And so different from a healthy view of intimacy. It sounds like the source is suggesting that narcissists aren't really capable of genuine intimacy at all.
Yeah, not in the way that most people understand it. You know, you have to remember, at the core of narcissism, there's a profound need for self-gratification. And everything, including sex, gets filtered through that lens.
Okay, so how does this play out in real-life situations? The source mentions narcissists in the workplace, which sounds particularly alarming.
Yeah, and it can be incredibly damaging. So imagine a narcissist in a position of power, say like a CEO or a senior manager. They might use sex to coerce their subordinates, demanding favors in exchange for promotions, or even threatening someone's job if they refuse. It's about dominance and exploiting their position for personal gain.
And it's not limited to those at the top, right?
Yeah.
The source mentions narcissists in junior roles using similar tactics to climb the ladder.
Absolutely. They might leverage sex to curry favor with superiors, or even sabotage colleagues to get ahead. It's all part of a pattern of exploiting others to get what they want, with very little regard for the ethical implications.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about how this impacts personal relationships. The source talks about partners of narcissists feeling used and disconnected, even violated during sex. That's heartbreaking.
It really is. One survivor in the source describes it so vividly. She talks about her partner initiating sex after a couple glasses of wine, feeling my bum or my leg, no introduction or warm-up, a button had been pressed, aided by the alcohol, I must comply.
Wow. That's disturbing. To feel like you have to comply during something that should be intimate and consensual. It's just awful. It really speaks volumes about the lack of respect and empathy.
Exactly. It's not about shared pleasure for the narcissist. It's about getting their needs met, regardless of how their partner feels.
The source also mentions a possible link between narcissism and a higher likelihood of engaging in BDSM or other kinks, often without truly considering their partner's well-being.
Yeah, and it's crucial to clarify here, we're not demonizing those practices inherently, but for a narcissist, they can become another tool for control and disregarding boundaries.
So it's not about the specific acts themselves, but about the motivation behind them.
Precisely. In a healthy dynamic, those practices are about exploration and mutual consent. But for a narcissist, they become a way to exert power and potentially exploit their partner's vulnerabilities.
This all points to a really disturbing power dynamic. The source even suggests that this can lead partners to develop coping mechanisms, like substance abuse, to deal with the emotional fallout.
Yeah, it's a painful reality.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the manipulative tactics don't stop there. The source also discusses how a narcissist might react to an unwanted pregnancy.
Oh, wow. That's a whole other layer of complexity.
It is. The source suggests that the responses could range from denial to threats, even demands for termination. And it all circles back to that lack of accountability and empathy. They're not considering the other person's feelings or the weight of the situation. It's all about how it impacts them.
That's so consistent with what we've been discussing. It's like their world revolves around their own needs. And to bring it back to a point you made earlier about narcissists in positions of power, the source mentions real-world examples like Jeffrey Epstein.
And Ghislaine Maxwell. Jimmy Savile, Bill Clinton. These are all high-profile cases that tragically demonstrate how power, wealth, and influence can be used to shield narcissists from the consequences of their actions.
It's infuriating, to be honest. And it highlights the incredible courage it takes for survivors to come forward, especially when they're up against such formidable opponents.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we all have a responsibility to believe survivors and fight for justice, no matter how powerful the perpetrator might be.
These high-profile cases really highlight the devastating consequences of unchecked narcissism. It's not just about hurt feelings. It can escalate to truly horrific acts of abuse and exploitation. This isn't just a theoretical discussion. These are real people whose lives have been profoundly impacted.
Yeah, it's a very sobering reality. And that's precisely why it's crucial to raise awareness and equip people with the knowledge to recognize these patterns and protect themselves.
So let's circle back to the core of what we've learned so far. The source from the Narcissistic Abuse Network paints a pretty clear picture here. Sex with a narcissist is always transactional.
Always.
It's about fulfilling their needs, not about shared intimacy or genuine connection.
Yeah, the source uses a really striking phrase to describe this. They call it a function, not an expression of love. And I think that really sums it up perfectly. It's a cold and calculated approach to something that most people consider deeply personal and emotional. And this disconnect can leave partners feeling used and confused and even betrayed.
It's easy to see how this can erode someone's self-esteem and make it difficult to trust others. But before we delve further into the impact on partners, let's take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment to continue our deep dive.
And it's important to remember that healing from this type of trauma is possible, but it takes time and it takes support. It's not something you just snap out of. So if you're struggling with the aftermath of narcissistic abuse, please know that you are not alone. There are resources available to help you process your experiences and rebuild your life.
Absolutely. And speaking of processing experiences, I'm curious about the psychological effects on partners. The source touches on feelings of being used, but what are the deeper long-term consequences?
The impact can be profound. So imagine, constantly being undermined, having your reality questioned, your needs dismissed. It can lead to chronic anxiety, depression, even PTSD. Many partners develop a deep sense of self-doubt, struggling to trust their own judgment or instincts.
So it goes beyond just feeling hurt or betrayed. It can actually damage someone's sense of self.
Absolutely. Narcissists are masters of manipulation, often employing tactics like gaslighting, where they deny or distort reality to make their partner question their own sanity. It's insidious and incredibly damaging over time.
Can you give an example of how gaslighting might play out in this context?
Sure. So imagine a partner expresses discomfort with a particular sexual act. A narcissist might respond with, "Don't be silly, you loved that last time," or "You're just being dramatic, stop overreacting." By denying their partner's reality and feelings, they chip away at their confidence and create a dynamic where the narcissist's desires always take precedence.
That's awful. It's like they're rewriting the script of the relationship to suit their own needs.
Exactly. And this constant manipulation can leave partners feeling trapped and powerless. Many stay in these relationships far longer than they should, hoping to fix the narcissist, or clinging to that idealized version they presented during the initial love bombing phase.
Love bombing. That's another tactic mentioned in the source.
Which is a classic narcissistic maneuver. So they shower their target with excessive attention and affection and grand promises early on. It's intoxicating, and it creates a very powerful bond, which makes it even harder to leave when the mask starts to slip and the manipulative behavior emerges.
It's like they're setting a trap, creating this illusion of this perfect relationship that never actually existed.
That's a great way to put it. And this cycle of idealization and devaluation and discard can be incredibly damaging to a partner's self-esteem and their ability to trust in future relationships.
So we've talked about the manipulative tactics narcissists use. But what about recognizing those early warning signs? What should our listeners be on the lookout for?
Yeah, so there's several red flags that the source highlights. One of the most prominent is an insatiable need for admiration and validation. So they constantly seek attention and praise, and they have a very hard time handling criticism, even if it's constructive.
So someone who always needs to be the center of attention and gets defensive easily.
Exactly. They also tend to have a grandiose sense of self-importance, so they might believe that they're special or superior to others, entitled to special treatment, and often lack empathy for those they perceive as beneath them.
You mentioned a lack of empathy earlier. Is that a universal trait among narcissists?
Yeah, it's one of the key characteristics. They struggle to understand or care about the feelings of others. They're so focused on their own needs and desires that they often bulldoze right over the people around them.
It sounds like it would be incredibly draining to be in a relationship with someone like that.
It can be utterly exhausting. You're constantly walking on eggshells, trying to anticipate their moods and avoid triggering their anger or disapproval. It's a constant power struggle where you're always trying to keep them happy, often at the expense of your own well-being.
Okay, so let's say someone is listening to this and they're realizing, wow, this sounds a lot like my partner. What advice would you give them?
First and foremost, I would encourage them to seek professional help. A therapist who specializes in narcissistic personality disorder can provide valuable guidance and support. It's crucial to understand that you can't change a narcissist. They have to be willing to change themselves.
So it's not about trying to fix them.
Exactly. The only person you have control over is yourself. Focus on setting healthy boundaries and protecting your own well-being. That might mean limiting contact, establishing firm limits on their behavior, or even ending the relationship entirely.
Those are tough choices, but it sounds like they might be necessary for self-preservation in some cases.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to emphasize that seeking help is not a sign of weakness. It takes immense strength to acknowledge these patterns and take steps to protect yourself.
Well said. So we've talked about the red flags, the manipulative tactics, and the profound impact on partners. But before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more point the source mentions. This idea that a narcissist's sexual prowess is often highly inflated.
Yes. The source points out that while a narcissist might see themselves as an incredible lover, this perception is rarely shared by their partners.
It's another example of their distorted reality, right?
Yeah.
Their need to believe that they're superior in every way.
Precisely. And this disconnect between their self-perception and the reality of their actions can be quite damaging in intimate relationships. It really reinforces that dynamic, where one person's needs and feelings are constantly prioritized over the others.
And that's never a recipe for a healthy or fulfilling relationship. So what's the key takeaway here for our listeners?
I think the most important message is this. You deserve to be in relationships where you feel respected, valued, and loved for who you are. You deserve to have your needs and boundaries honored. And if you're not experiencing that, it's okay to walk away and seek something better.
That's such an important message. You're worthy of love and respect. Don't ever settle for less. And on that note, I think it's time we move on to part 3 of this deep dive, where we'll explore some of the resources available for those who might be struggling with the effects of narcissistic abuse. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, and it's been pretty heavy stuff. But for someone listening who's realizing, wow, this sounds a lot like my partner, or even recognizing some of these traits in themselves, what's the next step?
It's definitely a lot to process, but awareness is the first step towards change. And it's important to remember we're talking about a spectrum here. Having some narcissistic traits doesn't automatically make someone a clinical narcissist.
Okay, that's a helpful distinction.
Yeah.
So much of what we've discussed feels so intentionally manipulative and hurtful. Is there room for self-awareness and change within that?
There can be. For someone recognizing these patterns in their own behavior, the fact that they're self-aware is already a positive sign. It suggests a capacity for introspection, which a true narcissist often lacks.
So self-awareness is key.
Absolutely. It's the foundation. And from there, therapy is crucial. A therapist can help unpack those harmful behaviors, explore the underlying reasons, and work towards healthier relationship patterns.
What about for someone on the receiving end of this kind of manipulation? What resources are out there for them?
Well, it's vital to remember that you're not alone. You're not to blame. Narcissistic abuse is incredibly isolating. It makes you question your own reality. So connecting with support systems is so important.
Where can people find those support systems?
The Narcissistic Abuse Network is a great starting point. They have online forums, support groups, just a wealth of information. Therapy is also crucial. A therapist can really help you process the trauma, rebuild your self-esteem, and learn to set healthy boundaries.
Boundaries seem to be a recurring theme here.
Yeah, they're essential. Learning to say no, to enforce your needs and your limits, is crucial for protecting yourself, whether you stay in the relationship or not.
It makes me think about how often we prioritize the narcissist's needs above our own, almost like a survival mechanism.
Yeah, you adapt to survive, but ultimately, that survival should lead to thriving. You deserve relationships that are built on mutual respect and genuine connection, and pleasure that's shared, not taken.
That's powerful. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one message you want to leave our listeners with?
Healthy sexuality is about connection, respect, mutual pleasure. It's never about control or using someone for your own needs. If your experience doesn't align with that, you have the right to seek something better.
Beautifully said. And for our listeners, I'd add this. We've explored some dark territory today. But knowledge is power. The more you understand about narcissism, the better equipped you are to navigate relationships and protect your own well-being. You deserve love and respect in all aspects of your life. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring and keep diving deep.